10 terrifying Reddit tailies. From security guards you won't believe, there are places in this world that just feel different after dark. Empty office buildings, deserted warehouses, silent hospitals. The only sound is the hum of the fluorescent lights, and every shadow seems to twitch right at the edge of your vision. Most of us get to leave these places behind when the sun goes down, but some people are paid to stay. The security guards who walk the lonely corridors and stare into security monitors, just waiting for something to happen. Tonight, we're diving into the dark corners of Reddit to pull out 10 of the most terrifying, unexplainable, and bone-chilling stories told from the perspective of security guards. These tales are a reminder that sometimes the most frightening things happen when no one else is around. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe, because we bring you new tales of terror every week. Now, let's begin. Story 1, the hospital morgue. Our first story comes from a user who took a job as a guard at a large regional hospital. The job was mostly quite a good fit for a student trying to make some extra cash. But during his interview, the manager asked him a strange question. "You don't believe in ghosts, do you?" The guard just laughed it off, but the man's dead serious expression was unnerving. He soon learned why. One night, a call came through to the security phone. It was a faint, elderly woman's voice, claiming she was lost and cold down in the basement. The problem? The only thing in the basement was the morgue. He felt his heart start to hammer as he went down into the building's silent depths. The morgue doors needed a key card, so how could anyone have possibly gotten in? He scanned his card, stepped inside, and was hit by the low hum of the large silver freezers. He called out. No answer. He walked deeper into the main room, leaving his flashlight on a table in the small office behind him. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. His flashlight had been turned off. In the faint glow of a computer screen, he saw the outline of a figure gliding silently toward the office door, trapping him. It was small, and it stood between him and his only way out. He never saw its face, and by the time backup arrived, it was gone. He quit the next month. Story 2. The man in the catwalks. Not all horrors are supernatural. Some are terrifyingly real. Our next story is from a guard assigned to a closed-down sports arena, a massive 100-year-old building. Most nights, the place just felt off. But one evening, that feeling was sharper. He was doing his rounds, walking the narrow wooden catwalks high above the old arena floor where the spotlights used to hang. Suddenly, he heard a loud creak right behind him. He spun around, his flashlight beam slicing through the dark. A man was standing there, frozen mid-step, caught in the act of sneaking up on him. The man had a wide, almost playful grin on his face, but in his hand, he was holding a large steel pipe. The guard drew his weapon, and the man bolted, disappearing into the maze of corridors in the old building. The police came and a K-9 unit swept the arena, but they never found him. They did, however, find where he'd been living. On dusty concession counters, the intruder had drawn stick figures hanging from nooses and scribbled bizarre, unsettling rhymes. The police figured he'd been living in the building for days, making a sick game out of silently stalking the guards on their patrols. Story 3. The playroom. A security guard shift at a family community center was usually the definition of routine. Lock the doors, check the rooms, watch the monitors. But one night, that routine was shattered. The guard had just finished a patrol of the empty building when he heard it. The distinct sound of a shower turning on in the men's locker room. He went to investigate, his footsteps echoing in the total silence. The second he reached the door, the water stopped. He pushed it open. The room was empty. The floor was bone dry. Shaken, he tried to write it off as the old building's plumbing. He continued his rounds, heading towards the children's playroom. As he passed the door, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. From inside the pitch-black room, the electronic voice of a child's toy called out, "Goodbye." He knew for a fact that every single toy had been switched off. He spent the rest of his shift locked in the security office, paralyzed by the feeling that something was watching him from the shadows. He later said he felt like something followed him home that night. Story 4. The Invisible Man on Camera. Our next story comes from a security dispatch officer at a tribal casino during the pandemic shutdown. With the massive building completely empty, the usual vibrant chaos was gone. No slot machines ringing, no music, no crowds. Every little sound was amplified in the eerie silence. One night, while sitting in the dispatch office, he and his supervisor were watching the monitors. On a camera feed showing one of the hotel hallways, the lights began to flicker. As they watched, they saw a shape move down the far end of the hall, right toward the camera. It was vaguely human-shaped, but completely transparent, like a heat haze distortion. It moved without a sound, passing directly under the camera and out of sight. The two guards just stared at each other, then back at the screen, speechless. And that wasn't all. Throughout the shutdown, lights in empty hotel rooms would turn on by themselves. When guards went to check, they'd find the room's trashed pillows thrown around, toilet paper unspooled onto the floor, as if a phantom guest had just checked out. Story 5. The Smiling Man in the Elevator. Sometimes, the creepiest encounters happen in plain sight, in places you're supposed to feel safe. This story comes from a woman who went to her 24-hour gym at 5:30 in the morning. The building always had a security guard at the front desk. This morning, it was a man she'd never seen before. He smiled as she walked in, and she immediately felt a powerful sense of unease. As she went to wait for the elevator, the guard stood up and walked out from behind his desk to wait with her. It was odd, but she tried to ignore the bad feeling. When the elevator arrived, he gestured for her to get in first. Her instincts screamed at her, "Don't." She faked a phone call and let him take the elevator alone. She waited several minutes, listening to a couple of songs on her headphones before calling the elevator again. The door dinged and opened instantly. The man was still inside, standing in the exact same spot, wearing that same creepy smile, as if to say, "Aren't you going to get in?" He had been waiting for her the entire time. She backed away, took the stairs, and never went back to that gym in the early morning again. Story 6. The Children in the Field. This account comes from a guard who worked the graveyard shift at a remote tomato plant in California's Central Valley. For 5 years, the job was dead silent. He was the only person for miles. One night, he stepped out of the guard shack for a cigarette. As he stood there in the immense quiet, he heard something faint talking and laughing, coming from the open field behind the shack. He dismissed it as the wind, but the giggling continued. Annoyed, he walked around the side of the building to see who it was. There, in the middle of the field, he saw two small children, a boy and a girl, talking and laughing. He squinted, confused. How could they have gotten all the way out here? That's when he noticed their clothes looked old-fashioned, and their bodies seemed almost transparent. Then he saw the most horrifying detail of all. From the waist down, they had no bodies. Suddenly, they went quiet and turned to look directly at him, as if they knew they were being watched. And in that moment, he saw they had no faces, just smooth, blank skin. He bolted back into the shack, locked the door, and spent the rest of his shift shaking in the corner. Story 7. The Stalker in the Uniform. A young woman working in the cosmetics department of a drugstore was initially relieved when the company hired evening security guards. One guard, a guy named Mike, seemed friendly and would often chat with her to pass the time. But soon, his presence became deeply unsettling. He started showing up only on her shifts. He would even appear at the store on his day off, claiming he was just there to get a prescription. But the pharmacy staff confirmed he had no order to pick up. The final straw came one evening when she was stocking a low shelf. A car honked outside, and as she glanced up at the window, she saw his reflection in the glass. He was standing right behind her, just staring. She fled to the other side of the store to get her manager. When the manager went back to look, Mike was gone. Her manager immediately called the security company, only to be told that Mike had quit the week, before after being specifically told to stay away from her store. He had been stalking her without a uniform, without a job, and without anyone knowing. Story 8. The figure in the brewery working third shift security at a brewery. One guard in this story felt something was wrong from his very first week. The site had 2 buildings, the main brewery and a bar about 200 feet away, where guards would stay to overlook the facility. The lights were motion activated. One night, returning from a patrol, he walked into the dark bar. As the lights flickered on, he froze. Standing in the doorway to a back room was a thing. It was humanoid, but its arms were unnaturally long, and dark hair covered its entire upper body. It was so tall its head nearly touched the top of the doorframe. He blinked, and it was gone. He later learned from day shift workers that he wasn't the only one to see it, though most refused to even talk about what they called him. A few weeks later, as he was leaving, he waited in the small, glass-enclosed airlock between the inner and outer doors. As the outer door slid shut, he saw a reflection in the glass. The creature was standing right behind him, towering over him, its long arms hanging limp at its sides. He never waited in that space again. Story 9. The vanishing family at Disney. Even the happiest place on earth has its dark corners. Our next story is less of a security report and more of a famous piece of internet legend, a creepypasta that has haunted online forums for years. The story goes that a security guard at Disney World was called by management about a hotel room where the guests had seemingly vanished. For 3 days, their luggage, clothes, and snacks sat untouched. The reservation was for a family of 4. All calls went straight to voicemail. Digging into the park's security systems, the guard in the story found their last trace. They had used their magic bands to get on the It's a Small World ride. The ride famously takes photos of the guests. He pulled up the photo album. The first picture showed the family, smiling in their boat. But as he scrolled through the hundreds of photos taken during the ride, a horrific story unfolded. In each photo that followed, the family looked more and more terrified. He could see the dolls in the background were turning to look at them. Further in, the dad was gone. Then, one of the children disappeared. By the end, only the mom and one child were left, looking catatonic with fear. According to the legend, the family never got off that ride. Story 10. The knocking from the freezer aisle. Our final story is a classic example, rules horror from Reddit. A guard takes a night job at a grocery store and is handed a bizarre set of rules on his first day. One rule stood out. Between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., he had to make 3 patrols, and if he saw a woman in the store, he was to immediately go to the break room and not make eye contact. On his second patrol, as he hurried down the freezer aisle, he heard a light tapping on the glass doors. It grew into loud thumps, as if someone was slamming their palms against the glass from the inside. He ignored it, just like the rules said, and ran back to the safety of the break room. On his final patrol, he was walking past the deli when he saw her, a woman in a black dress, holding a shopping basket filled with raw meat. He immediately averted his eyes to the floor, just as 2 black high-heeled shoes stepped into the aisle right in front of him. He was trapped. He risked a glance up at the security monitor on the ceiling and saw her on the screen, standing perfectly still. But then he realized with a jolt of pure terror, her heels were facing forward, but on the screen, he was looking at the back of her head. Her head was turned completely around. He quit that night and never looked back. Conclusion: the silence of the night shift holds secrets and stories that most of us are fortunate enough to never experience. For the people in these tailies, the line between the mundane and the terrifying simply vanished. The things they saw will stay with them forever, a chilling reminder of what might be lurking in the dark. What was the scariest story for you? Let us know in the comments below. And if you have a terrifying story of your own you'd like to share, feel free to send it to us for a chance to be featured in a future video. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories and want more unsettling tailies from the internet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Until next time, stay safe and try not to think about who or what is watching when the lights go out. Title: 7 True Reddit Horror Stories from Security Guards. They're the silent watchers in the dead of night, the guardians of buildings we all leave behind when we go home. But what happens when that silence gets broken? What happens when the darkness starts to watch back? These are 7 stories from Reddit, told by the security guards who came face to face with horrors, both supernatural and all too real. They were hired to protect property, but they ended up fighting for their lives. Story number 1. The Figure in the Lot. Our first story comes from a guard whose post was a massive empty corporate parking lot. You can imagine how mind-numbing that job is. Just hours of sitting, watching, and waiting for the sun to come up. His only company was the hum of a distant highway and the orange glow of the lot's lamps. Then one night, deep into his shift, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He leaned in, trying to focus on the rows of vacant spaces, and saw a shadowy figure dart between 2 cars. It was fast, almost too fast to be human. His heart started kicking against his ribs. Protocol was simple: investigate any trespasser. He grabbed his big maglite and stepped out of the warm guard shack into the cold night. He walked the lot, his footsteps echoing in a way that just makes your skin crawl. He checked behind every car, swept his light into every shadow. Nothing. Not a single footprint, not a sound. But then he got that feeling, that primal, distinct sensation of being watched. Shaking his head, he told himself it was just paranoia and headed back to the shack. The feeling didn't go away, though. It was only when he was reviewing the security tapes the next day that he saw it. At the exact moment he'd seen the figure, the camera feed for that part of the lot just dissolved into a burst of static, a totally inexplicable glitch. He never saw the figure again, but he never felt truly alone in that lot either. Story number 2, The Laughter on the 3rd Floor. This next story takes us inside a modern, multi-story office building. During the day, it was a beehive of activity. At night, it was a tomb. A guard, who we'll call Mark, was on duty doing his rounds on every floor. The first few hours were always the same. A silent, predictable walk through empty cubicles and dark conference rooms. But this night was different. As he was walking through the 3rd floor, he heard it. It was faint, like a muffled conversation, and it was coming from one of the locked offices. He pressed his ear against the door, and the sound got clearer. It was laughter. Not just one person, but several people, like an office party, was in full swing. He double-checked the door. Locked solid, just like he'd left it. He radioed his supervisor, who confirmed what he already knew. The entire floor was empty. Nobody had clearance to be up there. A little unnerved, he kept going with his rounds, trying to explain it away. Maybe it was an echo, or a sound carrying from outside. But an hour later, on his next pass, he heard it again from a completely different office. This time he could hear distinct voices, but he couldn't make out any words. He spent the rest of the night on edge, writing it all down in his log. This kept happening for several nights, always from different locked rooms. Mark eventually put in for a transfer, convinced that some of the building's former employees had never really clocked out. Story number 3, The Stalker in the Hotel. Of course, not all horrors are paranormal. Sometimes the monster is very, very real. This story is from a guard who worked security at a high-end hotel. The night started out normally dealing with a few noisy guests, the usual, but then a panicked call came from the front desk. A guest was reporting a man trying to force his way into her room. The guard and his partner took off, rushing to the 5th floor. As they rounded the corner, they saw him. A man, twitchy and agitated, was messing with the lock on a hotel room door. When he saw the guards, he didn't even try to run. He just turned to face them, and that's when they saw the knife. The guard described it as a zombie knife, one of those huge, serrated, wicked-looking blades. The man lunged. The whole thing was escalating faster than they could control it. Thinking fast, the guard grabbed a fire extinguisher off the wall and just blasted the guy in the face. Blinded by the foam, the man stumbled back, choking. That 1 second was all they needed. His partner tackled the man to the ground, and they managed to hold him down until the police got there. The incident was over in a few moments, but the image of that knife and the look in the stalker's eyes, that's something that stays with you. It's a brutal reminder that the biggest threat isn't always a ghost, but a man with a weapon. These guards are putting their lives on the line every single night. If these stories are giving you chills, show some support by hitting that like button and subscribing for more true horror. And if you have a story of your own, you know what to do. Drop it in the comments below. Now, let's get back to the darkness. Story number 4. The pool in the dead of night. You'd think a community rec center would be a pretty safe gig, right? For one night guard became his own personal haunting ground. He was assigned to patrol the whole facility, which had a big indoor pool, a gym, and a children's playroom. During the day, it was filled with laughter and splashing. At night, it was supposed to be dead silent. It wasn't. It started small. He'd be doing his rounds and hear the clear sound of footsteps echoing from the empty pool deck. He'd go look, only to find the massive tiled area completely empty, with the still water just reflecting the moonlight. Then, things started to get weirder. One night, he walked into the locker room to find every single shower blasting hot water, filling the room with this thick, heavy steam. He was the only person in the building. The playroom was the worst part, though. He'd walk past and hear the faint, tinny music of a kid's toy. He'd step inside and find a single toy plastic Ferris wheel, or a jack-in-the-box, sitting in the middle of the floor, playing all by itself. Each time something happened, it was more unnerving than the last, building this creeping sense of dread. That feeling of being watched became his nightly companion, a silent presence that followed him through the dark, empty halls of a place meant for fun. Story number 5. The Warehouse Trespassers. This next story takes us to the sprawling, isolated grounds of an industrial warehouse district. Working alone in a place like that is already isolating, but one guard found out just how dangerous that can be. He was watching the camera feeds from his little security office when he saw movement out by the perimeter fence. He zoomed in and saw 3 people in hoodies trying to cut through the chain link. This wasn't a ghost. This was a break-in, happening right now. He immediately followed protocol, locking his office door and calling the police. Then he got on the intercom and issued a warning, telling the intruders they were being recorded and that the cops were on their way. For a second, they froze. He thought maybe it had worked. But then, one of them turned, looked right at the camera, and made a threatening gesture. They gave up on the fence and started walking straight for his guard shack. They weren't being quiet anymore. They were getting aggressive. The guard could hear them shouting and rattling the handle on his door. He backed away, his heart hammering against his ribs, just waiting to hear sirens. The few minutes it took for the police to show up felt like an eternity, and it was a stark reminder of the very real dangers that come with guarding the dark, forgotten corners of a city. Story number 6. Lights in the unfinished building. Sometimes, the scariest thing is simply not knowing what you're up against. Is it a person? Or is it something else? This guard worked security at a massive construction site. basically a skeleton city of unfinished buildings. His job was to patrol the perimeter and make sure no one wandered into the dangerous site. One night, he saw lights turning on and off in one of the half-finished towers. The thing is, there was no power connected to that section yet. There shouldn't have been any lights at all. He radioed it in and cautiously walked toward the building, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. As he got closer, a motion sensor he had just walked past went off behind him. He spun around, sweeping his light everywhere, but saw nothing. No person, no animal, just the cold, concrete frame of the building. He entered the tower, shouting that he was security. His voice was just swallowed by the vast, empty space. He searched floor by floor and found absolutely nothing. The lights stayed off, but as he patrolled for the rest of the night, it kept happening. A light would flick on in one building, then go out, while a motion sensor would trip on the complete opposite side of the site. He never found a single sign of a trespasser, no footprints, no broken locks. He was just left in a constant state of anxiety, never sure if he was dealing with a very clever intruder or something else entirely. Story number 7. The home invasion for our final story. We have a situation that is every security guard's absolute worst nightmare. This guard was on a team assigned to a huge, wealthy private home. It was supposed to be a quiet, cushy post. That illusion was shattered one evening. It started with a loud crash from the back of the property. The guards on patrol saw a group of masked men swarming over the backyard fence. They were carrying baseball bats and sledgehammers. This wasn't just a burglary. It was a full-on home invasion. The guards were outnumbered and outmatched. Their priority instantly changed from protecting the property to protecting the family inside. While some guards rushed to get the family into a panic room, others tried to barricade the doors. But the attackers were relentless. They used a sledgehammer to smash through a large glass sliding door, and a storm of shattered glass exploded into the room. One of the assailants broke through and charged at a guard, swinging a large knife. A desperate, violent fight broke out. The guards fought back with whatever they could grab, holding the line just long enough for the police to storm the property. They saved the residents, but not without getting injured themselves and being left with the terrifying memory of a chaotic, violent invasion they were never truly trained to handle. Conclusion: from flickering lights in an empty building to the raw violence of a home invasion, these stories give us a chilling look into the world of the men and women who stand watch while the rest of us are asleep. They're hired to guard against the threats they can see, but so often, the real horror lies in the threats they never saw coming. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there,